Welcome to another edition of Around the Table with Stacy Smith. There are now 26 days until the May primary here in Pennsylvania. And to put it bluntly, if this were a horse race, well, you had better start making your move because the fourth turn is coming up and then it's the straightaway down the stretch to the finish line. So where do things stand? Should some candidates get out of the race to make room for the front runners? Or is there a path to charge up the middle and run past the current front runners? Well, let's talk about that with our group of esteemed analysts on the political side, and I'm going to introduce them to you right now. And they are Jim Byrne, who is the former chairman of the State Democratic Party here in Pennsylvania. Jim also served as the president of Allegheny County Council and the mayor of Millvale. Jim is an attorney here in town. We go across the table now and we find Keith Schmidt. Keith's background is in politics and it dates back to the Reagan presidency. Keith was the former state director for former Pennsylvania Republican Senator Rick Santorum. He also was a consultant to Santorum's presidential bid in 2012. Keith has his own consulting firm. Normally, we have two other guests with us, and that would be the former governor of Pennsylvania, Republican Tom Corbett. He could not be with us today, and neither could Joe Mystic, who is, of course, a lawyer in town, teaches law at Duquesne University, and is well-versed in politics on the Democratic side. So unfortunately, we don't have both of them there, but we do have two great analysts in Jim and in Keith. So let's start with this topic right now. And Jim, I'm going to start with you. The Democratic contest for the nomination for the United States Senate. There is not that much public polling on the Democratic side, but the latest poll does have Lieutenant Governor John Fetterman ahead by 23 points over Congressman Connor Lamb. And also more than that, over the other challenger, which of course is State Representative Malcolm Kenyatta. Now, Fetterman skipped the first statewide debate, but he is scheduled to appear in a debate scheduled for tomorrow night. So, Jim, I'll start with this. How critical is this debate for the candidates?
I think that it is critical, as you prefaced with this this segment of our show. We're getting to the three-quarter turn and almost to the straightaway. We've talked in prior segments about the polling showing Mr. Fetterman to have a significant lead, time running out, in the need for one or both of the other candidates to do something to make some headway. This is critical for all three. It's critical for Mr. Fetterman because now he's going to directly face direct questions from his opponents and from the panelists that are asking him. This will be a great opportunity for Mr. Lamb, and I am keeping my eye on Representative Malcolm Kenyatta to really see what type of an impact he can make on this stage. Because when you look at his message, his presentation, his ability to articulate, all he needs to do is get a little bit of momentum. And I know that Mr. Fetterman has a significant advantage in the war chest department. I get that, but that hasn't moved his numbers. There are still so many undecideds out there. Folks aren't necessarily going to need to be hammered with mailers or phone calls or television ads by Mr. Fetterman. If they see something beginning tonight that they like from one or both of the other challengers, I would expect to start to see those margins come close. So the short answer is this is a very big night for all three. Can John Fetterman hold serve? He's been doing it essentially by doing nothing for the last 6 weeks. Now he has to step up. Will the other two seize this opportunity to try to close ground and make this a closer race? There are enough undecideds still out there to make that happen.
There's always a danger when you're protecting a lead where you don't get aggressive enough or you sit on your laurels. I don't see that happening with John Fetterman. My sense is he's going to go full tilt for the next 27 days. And polls, you know, some people put too much emphasis on polls, but you can't ignore a poll that has one candidate 23 points ahead of another. I mean, that's a significant lead. It's not a January poll or a February poll. We're within, less than 4 weeks from people making a final decision. So what I would set the stage for at the upcoming debate is the real contender in my mind, the person that might have an outside chance of sneaking this nomination, arguably would be Connor Lamb. But he needs to make a move, in my mind, at this debate. He needs a debate moment. He needs something that he could use on paid media from that debate. He needs to land a punch. And really, Mr. Fetterman has to avoid a gaffe. Those are the two things. When you're protecting a lead, you don't want to say or do anything. So I have a feeling you're going to see Fetterman being very generic and very safe in his answers because he's protecting a lead. But I would say that watch for Lamb's people to have him on offense big time. I think he's going to look to land a few body punches in the hopes of eating into that double-digit advantage.
Jimmy, what's your thought on that? Should Connor Lamb or Malcolm Kenyatta come out swinging? And what if they both come out swinging? Does that play to Fetterman's benefit?
Oh no, I agree with Keith. They have to come out and call out Mr. Fetterman on issues that they think are relevant, issues that they think need answered. They have to score some points. It's really analogous to a prize fight. If you think that you're down on that scorecard, and if you assume these polls are somewhere in the ballpark and you are down on the scorecard and you've got 2 or 3 rounds left, time to start throwing some haymakers. But conversely, if you open yourself up, you could get a counterpunch just as quickly. Mr. Fetterman will be prepared to do that. But watch for Mr. Fetterman's answers on a couple significant points. Expect for the 2 challengers to ask him about this reputation for being a no-show. Now, the recent debate that he didn't show up for, he got some criticism for that. But that's not the no-show that's going to be the one that you'll hear about on these debates. The no-shows you're going to hear about are his failure to attend significant events by significant leaders and people of influence across this Commonwealth, whose opinions, endorsements, and ability to grassroots advocate are necessary when you want to win in a primary. In particular, the clergy in Philadelphia, who Mr. Fetterman has ignored, who gave no adequate excuse for not attending their events. There's been no valid excuse. Expect for him to be asked about the no-shows. Expect for him to be asked, well, if you can't even show up for an event in Pennsylvania when you're a candidate, how can we expect you to show up in the Beltway when it's time to bring the goods back to our Commonwealth? Are you not going to go because you don't like to be in crowds, because you don't like to schmooze, while 49 other states get what we should have received? Watch for those questions to be asked, and watch for questions to be asked about that unfortunate incident when he was mayor of Braddock and he pulled a weapon. His answers so far, in my opinion, to that encounter have been woefully inadequate. So those are the 2 things I would watch for the challengers to come after Mr. Fetterman with tonight. And I would be curious, as is the rest of our state, to see how he answers them, because so far his answers have not been sufficient, in my opinion.
If I'm John Fetterman, Keith, you can jump in on this one as well. If I'm John Fetterman, what am I going to go after Connor Lamb about?
Well, let me say that potentially his slight resume, that I think he might bring up the fact that there's been a meteoric rise of sorts for young Mr. Lamb, and whether he is ready for the primetime position of a seat in the upper chamber of the United States Congress. Could be argued that he's not ready yet, and he hasn't even fully served the people of Southwestern Pennsylvania in a way that he can tout many accomplishments as a congressman. But when you were talking about Mr. Kenyatta, the interesting thing about him, and I kind of downplayed that I thought the real opponent, if there is going to be one for the lieutenant governor, is Connor Lamb. But you can't dismiss the fact that the most populous area of the state for Democratic rich votes is the Southeast. And he's going to have Philadelphia under his name. But I would suggest that this plays into the lieutenant governor's hand. The fact that this is arguably still a 3-man race favors the man with 23-point lead. There is no runoff. The person with the plurality in a primary gets the nomination. So if Mr. Fetterman takes body punches and people decide to leave him, unfortunately, they can leave him for one of 2 people. If they're only leaving him for an opponent, that could put that opponent in a more credible position to make up this deficit. The fact that it's a 3-way race, to be honest with you, I think this goose is cooked. I think Fetterman will play defense or protect the lead, and I think he's going to be their party's nominee on the 17th of May.
But yeah, but that would be the odds. That would be the odds-on wager. I don't dispute that, but there's a couple variables we need to consider on that point. When Mr. Fetterman ran for lieutenant governor, I believe that his opposition, if not all of it, was on the east part of the state. So they cut everything up out there collectively. He won the West, but he did not win it well. I mean, his numbers were anemic in the West. They were weak, but they were strong enough to win. He was the only guy out in the West running. His numbers were weak. He won because there were so many other people out in the East. If it had been a one-on-one with Mike Stack and John Fetterman, Fetterman would have lost. So now you have Fetterman in the West with another Western candidate carving up the 79 corridor, while, like you said correctly, Keith, Malcolm Kenyatta not only has Philadelphia under his name, which resonates in that city. Philly always votes Philly, but you're going to see the collar counties. You're going to see Chester, Delaware, Bucks, Montgo, Lehigh, the 5 collar counties. They're going to gravitate towards him as well. It's a gravitational pull towards Philadelphia in primaries. Traditionally, we've seen it. So I'm not prepared to say that the goose is cooked. So you know, it's going to be very interesting to race to watch in the next month or so.
All right, I want to move on, and I don't want to spend a lot of time on this one, but Jim, I'm going to stay with you just for a second. Money, of course, is the lifeblood of politics, especially political campaigns. First quarter tally shows Fetterman has $3.9 million available to spend on the primary, while Lamb has 1.2. What about support from Lamb's colleagues on Capitol Hill and the National Party? Is it going to come through for him?
It's a two-edged sword. I mean, right now it's so hard. I mean, when you're branded an establishment candidate right now, especially in primaries, it just doesn't. It has not traditionally worked well for either party in recent cycles. President Trump found the Oval Office because he was an outsider. If Bernie Sanders hadn't got jobbed by the DNC, he probably would have been the outsider candidate for the Democrats in 2016. So it cuts both ways. The Beltway has tried to say that they were staying out of this, and there was an article in Politico recently how, unlike what they did in 2016, when they went all in with Katie McGinney, the establishment candidate, against Joe Sestak, the outsider, because he was winning, they won the primary, but they lost the fall. I think they have some reluctance now to do for Connor what they did for Katie. Why? The progressive wing has gotten stronger in the last 6 years, and they're worried about the backlash and the repercussions of doing to John what they did to Joe Sestak 6 years ago. So they may be doing some super PACs here and some super PACs there, and there's some things coming up that are pro Connor Lamb, which have the insider establishment fingerprints all over them without a direct connection. But I think they want some plausible denial this time because of the lessons they learned 6 years ago and because of the growing momentum and strength of the progressive base.
All right, let's move on to the Republican side.
Well, I
changed.
wanted to comment on that.
Okay,
If
go
I
right
could.
ahead, please.
Yeah, please. First of all, I think that, you know, in a 50-50 Senate, you really have to be careful where you put your money. I mean, this is it's the balance of power lies with 1 or 2 votes. And you have to remember, Mr. Toomey's retiring, so this is already a Republican seat. So the threshold for the National Democratic Party and the Senatorial Committee is higher. They want to make sure if they're going to go after somebody that's not a net gain, that person has a real good chance. And I've said on previous programs, and I'll say it again now, you have to prove yourself before they give you money. And at this point, I think he has not raised, Connor Lamb, the necessary amount of money to impress the National Senatorial Committee. And that's going to be an issue for him. And quite frankly, when you read off those 2 figures, 3.9 million and 1.2, it sounds more like a congressional race than a Senate race. I mean, the fact is, I think Mr. Fetterman took a page out of his boss's playbook. And Mr. Fetterman spent a lot of early money like Mr. Wolf did in his first term for governor and cleared the field early. And he built up this lead early, this 23-point lead, and now he's trying to protect it. But having only 3.9 million and 1.2 million, I've seen congressional races with that on hand with this many days left.
But I have to tell you, though, that's just for the primary. They have more money also, at least $1 million or
because
more.
it's dedicated to the fall.
To the fall campaigns. Right. Exactly. All right. Moving on to the Republican side. Things have changed a little with former President Trump now endorsing Dr. Oz for the Republican nomination for Senate. None of you, of course, or neither of you, I should say, are a fan of public polls, and there's been only one since Trump's endorsement. But that was enough to push Oz up to a 3-point lead over his stiffest challenger, which, of course, is Dave McCormick. The numbers are not overwhelming, with Oz at 23%, McCormick at 20%, and Kathy Barnett coming up at 18%. So, Keith, I will ask you on the Republican side of things, how significant is the Trump endorsement for Oz at this point?
It's that's a real tough question to answer. It's interesting how people get their news today. There's so many sources for news, and a lot of news organizations don't cover politics, especially at a state level, like the Oz endorsement by the former president. So a lot of people are watching television and seeing commercials. So I would argue that you might see commercials more than you're educated on what the former president might have said or did about a particular candidate. Fast forward to what's playing on television right now. The last 2 days, I've been seeing this motorcycle ad for Mr. McCormick, and it ends with pretty much looking like a Trump rally with all kinds of Trump signs around. So he didn't miss a beat. The Trump endorsed his opponent, and he's still using Trump to his advantage, saying that he espouses his policies and that he would be a pro-Trump candidate. The problem for Dr. Oz with his endorsement is he got a bump, but it likely will not be enough, because if it's a 2 or 3 point bump with 27 days left, one thing I know for sure, there's a bottomless pit of the bottomless checkbook for McCormick. He's a billionaire. He could put as much money as he has to change the outcome of this race. But as we said in previous debates on around the table, the two of them have spent tens of millions of dollars beating each other up. And it looks like now there is someone who's benefiting from that. There is somebody running up the middle. And when you look at Kathy Barnett, who is within a few points of these two and spent 1/10, maybe 1/20th the amount of money, you have to take a long look at her as being a person that might surprise everybody in 27 days.
I can't say it any better than what Keith just said. Uh-oh. Check the alignment. The planets have aligned. The Keith, no, Barnett it almost appears to me that Barnett is gaining momentum because of the folks who aren't really excited about Oz or McCormick, and they haven't been yet, but they've been looking for an alternative. And she has positioned herself with nominal resources to perhaps be the alternative that all those undecideds on your side of the aisle have been looking for. I know, like 17 days or how many days left now is in
27
this game, but wow, look at where she has positioned herself. Would I be falling off of my chair if we were all here together after the primary and calling her the Republican nominee? Not at all. And, I don't know necessarily that the President Trump endorsement of Mr. Oz has helped either of them. Many in the conservative base were taken aback by that. They don't really believe that Mr. Oz is the conservative that he puts himself out to be. They were disappointed and discouraged by the president's support of him, which is why I don't think those numbers move further than 3. And I don't even think that 3 might have been an initial knee-jerk reaction to the president weighing in. I don't know that it's a hard 3%. I think it could fall back and make it closer. But let's see where she is in about another week or two. It would not shock me if she starts to pull dead even.
You really think this is a path for her to come in and take this one, Jim?
I'm the alternative. She stands up at the debates. She makes a good performance, doesn't make mistakes, talks about the issues. She's not attacking either one. She goes after things that the Democratic Party has done that she thinks are mistakes, uses the right language to fire up the conservative base about what she would do to correct what she perceives to be the wrongs of the Biden administration, what she stands for, while those two are throwing rocks at each other. Absolutely, I think there's a path.
And as the Republicans continue to want to be more of a Big Ten party, looking at a Black woman for the nomination of the United States Senate certainly couldn't hurt them or their brand.
She's qualified, irrespective of whether or not I agree or disagree with her ideology or her platform. That's not what we're talking about. Let's just talk straight out objectively about qualifications, story, and an ability to get votes. As a chairman, I was always looking for qualified, diverse candidates, women candidates to run for various offices. And when you look at the maps, I mean, the candidates that are winning statewide right now, convincingly, on both sides of the aisle, are qualified women candidates with message and energy and enthusiasm. They are just cleaning house right now. So it may better serve the GOP to make that Big Ten argument. And I truly believe, Keith, that variable, that consideration that you just articulated is a significant factor in what is driving her numbers up into the conversation.
Jim, I have to ask you this then, as a former state Democratic Party chairman, if you were the chairman right now, would this be a concern for you, whether it would be Fetterman, Lamb, or Kenyatta?
The Democrats are going to have a tough time, whoever gets the nomination, just by the nature of the cycle that we're currently in. The president's numbers, whether you like it or not, are down. You have a midterm. Traditionally, the party that doesn't have the White House gains seats. So you have all of those, and all the polling suggests it's going to be a good year for the Republicans. I'm not prepared to accept that yet, but the writing is there. I mean, that's what it looks like. So as a state, if I'm the state chairman right now, I'm worried about everything. You always are anyway, but yes, these are things that concern me about putting the best candidate on to survive what we think is going to be a big push by the GOP this fall. I would be more concerned with her as the nominee. There's things we can do with McCormick in his history. There's definitely things we can do with Oz in his history if I'm the chairman. I've already got the talking points written for both of them if they become the nominee on what we need to do to keep them from winning that seat. But no, of the three, if I'm the state Democratic chairman, I'm concerned the most with her. Absolutely.
Keith, your thought?
No, I would agree with that. That's a good assessment by Mr. Byrne. I mean, I would be more concerned with her. I think the issues for Dr. Oz have been well articulated on recent commercials for his stands on flip-flops on numerous issues. Mr. McCormick has a dismal record with China, which is on the front burner for people. And a diverse candidate, someone who brings diversity to the ticket, like an articulate, self-made woman, like the woman we're talking about here, Kathy Barnett, you'd be a little more sensitive about how you attack somebody like that. And quite frankly, there's no populist on the Democratic side. No one's running away with, even with a 23-point lead, he's not exactly someone that everybody loves. He's protecting a lead. There's a lot of undecided. There's nobody just marching in because of the power of the personality or the career that this person had in government or in the private sector. Somebody's going to win the Democratic nomination, but it's not going to be a heavyweight in my estimation. And this is already a Republican seat. I think for all the reasons that my colleague outlined, the winds of change are coming in a midterm, as they oftentimes do. So I have a feeling that the governor's race is going to be much more competitive. My sense is the Republicans are feeling increasingly confident about the Senate and would be extremely confident if somehow Kathy Barnett runs up the middle.
All right. Unfortunately, I don't think we're going to have time to get into the governor's race here. So I'm going to stick with the Senate side for just a moment. And we've talked about Kathy Barnett coming up through the middle. Jim, on the Democratic side, would it benefit Connor Lamb if Malcolm Kenyatta were to drop out of the race, or vice versa?
No, no, it's not going to happen. But even if there was an opportunity for that to present itself, I would say no. And the reason I would say no is because of the number of undecideds that are still out there. There's still enough votes out there that are up for grabs that either of the two, either Connor Lamb or Malcolm Kenyatta, they still have enough time and enough votes to be had to get right back up into that conversation. So there's no reason for either of them. Hypothetically, let's say Connor Lamb were to get out, and who is it? Is he going to endorse anyone? And if so, does that necessarily mean that all of his support will, in a binary fashion, go to whomever he endorses? No, it doesn't change the margins. There's nothing to be gained from it. There's just, if we were at like 90% decided or something of that nature, and we looked at the numbers showing one of the three to have a significant advantage and there was no path, then you have to have an honest conversation with yourself about whether you continue to pursue this. And would it benefit the Commonwealth first and foremost? And would it benefit the party, secondly, to drop out and throw your support behind one of the other two? That just doesn't present itself right now based on all of these dynamics we've been discussing up until today. The one in particular, Fetterman's soft advantage, that's not solid support, and the fact that so many votes are still out there for the other.
Yeah, and Lamb is arguably doing better than Kenyatta in the
Yeah.
polling, but
Yeah.
Lamb is still 23 points down.
Right.
So it's a tough argument to make. If Lamb was within 3 or 4 points, you might say, please, come on,
Yes.
you got to get out of this. You got to give me some help. You have to throw me a lifeline to be able to unseat him. But he's
Excellent.
23 points down. So why
Excellent
would Mr.
point.
Kenyatta, who's going to have Philadelphia under his name, not stay in the race? You're absolutely right, Jim. And the other thing you have to keep in mind, Stace, is all that they can do is say, I'm not an active candidate anymore. The time has passed even for the courts to get you off the ballot.
Right.
So his name, no matter what, all 3 names are going to appear on the ballot. Somebody could suspend their campaign, but you're still going to have 3 of them running in May.
To use a monopoly analogy, when you consider that the two of the 3 are from out here in the West, Malcolm Kenyatta has Boardwalk and Park Place,
Right.
and there is still time to build hotels. So,
all right, well, let's move over to the Republican side here. Keith, should anyone drop out, and would it really help a candidate not named McCormick or Oz to find a path to victory at this point? We've already seen Barnett's, the last poll we had, her coming up a little bit.
No, I don't think there's any reason at this point, especially as I said, the time has passed to get your name off the ballot. I think there's going to be definitely some movement for Kathy Barnett, largely because that poll shocked a lot of people. I mean, I've got a lot of people calling me saying, holy cow, I knew she was gaining some momentum. I thought she'd be at 10 or 11. She's at 18. And usually, Stacy, you got to buy it. You know, just getting earned media is tough when there's this many candidates. So there are Republican pundits and others scratching their head thinking, where did she come from here? You know, she's had some decent debate performances, and I think she's making some deals with conservative organizations around the Commonwealth, and trying to make a deal actually on the Republican governor's race, and doing a lot with Doug Mastriano. So I can tell you that number put shockwaves through the Republican establishment. And when you start getting momentum, that's a momentum move. She might still be behind, but she made that 3 points that Oz gained with the president's endorsement is not as significant as her coming from 4 or 5 points to 18. That's
Amazing.
The story for
amazing. And it's a snapshot of a moving picture. I mean, you know, what's the next one going to look like? I mean, that's a rocket. You know, what, it's going to stop immediately? No, it's not. It's going to be, the next one is going to be as intriguing. You're right, Keith, that came out of nowhere. It shocked your establishment. I can guarantee you it shocked ours as well. Chairman Byrne has a playbook for Oz. Chairman Byrne has a playbook for McCormick. Now Chairman Byrne's got to get to work on a playbook for her as well, because that is significant. And you have to start that conversation if you're the Democrat.
I should point this out. The poll that I'm referring to was taken soon after the former President Trump endorsed Oz. And so I have yet to see another poll since that. So we don't know how strong that endorsement now is, whether Oz's lead has grown, whether it's staying the same, whether Barnett's still out there. You know, again, this is one of the reasons you guys don't care for the public polls as much as you like the insider polls, but I have no access to the insider polls, unfortunately. So,
Keith, you know, when everybody was in the muddled middle back when Governor Wolf ran in 14, it was January, February, and everybody was in single digits. And then in the middle of a polar vortex, he ran that Jeep commercial and it hooked. Okay. And all of a sudden he went like a rocket. His numbers were comparable. I mean, they were better, but he went like a rocket. And then once everybody saw somebody moving decisively, all the air left the room.
They couldn't stop the momentum.
Query whether or not we're seeing something like that now.
Yeah, there's a bandwagon mentality in politics. People want to be with the winner. People love underdog stories. That they know one thing, that Kathy Barnett is a very successful woman in her own right, but she's not the millionaire that Oz is or McCormick is. And for her to run a largely grassroots effort and taking a specific message to the people and getting this type of results in polling makes people excited. They know they're getting to know her story, and now they're excited about toppling the big guys. So
The
that's
outsider.
where that momentum is really, really shifted.
The David v. Goliath, right there.
Amen. David v. Goliath is absolutely right.
Mhm.
All right, gentlemen, we are out of time. I want to thank you for joining us. I also want to thank you for watching, and I hope that you join us again for the next edition of Around the Table with Stacy Smith.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Stacy.